often talk about how the Dreamcast was the first console that I ever played, but rarely do I talk about my favorite console, the PlayStation 1. The if you don't look at the PlayStation 2 and then sort of retroactively count the PS1's library as a part of it, which very few people would do. It's a strange practice that I think probably only I have engaged in, specifically because it is very hard to pick between the two systems to decide which is actually my favorite. Most of the time I say the PlayStation 1 simply because there were so many experimental and interesting games on that console, or even just ports of existing games that happened to really push the limit. Like the PS1 port of Quake 2 is nothing short of a marvel of technical engineering. The fact that they could get this to run quite well on the system with good graphics that pretty closely resembled the PC version is insane. And moreover, the fact that this game could actually have 4-player split screen with only a little bit of slowdown, completely insane. And again, not really an experimental game, just kind of a technical marvel of what the console was truly capable of. And then, you go through here and you find Crash Bandicoot, which is an incredible 3D platformer, one that really pushed the envelope and did unique things in terms of the genre at the time. One of my all-time favorite series. But then you find weird stuff like No One Can Stop Mr. Domino, a game in which you are a domino running across a track, setting up dominoes behind you in order to knock down a number of key things in order to advance to the next stage. It's very difficult. It's a game that really presents itself with a lot of charm. It feels very Japanese, and there's no other game that I've played like it. It feels like a racer. It feels like a puzzler. It also feels like something totally unique and of its own. And if I look at other games here, a game like Wild 9 by the guys who brought you Earthworm Jim, a really strange kind of 2.5D platforming, side-scrolling romp, but it not really, like, it's got some strange mechanics going on. I could go on and on. There were a lot of really weird games that came out on the PlayStation 1 because it came out during a time in which developers were trying to figure out what a 3D game is. They didn't know how to make one at the time, so they were trying to figure out what a 3D game even could be. And because of that, you had a lot more strange and interesting games coming out. Like games like Jumping Flash is another good example. A 3D platforming game from a first-person perspective that's literally all focused on jumping throughout these big, expansive, beautiful worlds. Very colorful, wonderful stuff. I mean, the survival horror genre was popping off for the first time on this console. I could go on and on. But that's not really where I got my start with video games, at least not for the most part. There were a couple PlayStation 1 titles, namely Crash Bandicoot Warped, that I had played on the PlayStation 2 when I was really young, like 3 years old, and that had an influence on me. But the first console I ever played was the Dreamcast. And many of the games on that console had a similarly experimental feel, a feeling of ingenuity, genius, and curiosity behind them. The same sort of spirit that was very present on the PlayStation 1, which makes sense because a lot of the games on the Dreamcast were like souped up PlayStation 1 games, but a lot of them were weird, art house, strange, experimental stuff that Sega was doing as well, and the Japanese developers that happened to have been in cahoots with them around that time. So I feel as though some of my most formative experiences with video games were with these older games that pushed the envelope, that tried to do different things that would not really be tried again in the future generations, but wound up being pretty emblematic of the generation that they came from. Um, and that was really like where my love of retro video games began, because that was the stuff that I started out with. I started to go back further, to older generations from even further in the past, and I didn't find quite the same type of experimentation, but I nonetheless found many beautiful masterpieces of video games, many interesting things being done, and fun experiences to have. But maybe one day, I'll see my PlayStation 1 collection expand, and I'll have more things to talk about with respect to that console. Lord knows there's quite a lot out there. To have this dream, a dream that abruptly came to an end after certain things were made known to me. I had been working on getting disability for a couple of years by the time I had actually got it. I got it like pretty late into me being 17, or at least it was made known that I would get it. It wasn't until a little later that I actually got approved, and the payments started rolling out. But I had applied, with my parents a while back, and I had been trying to get on it since I was 16, because at that time my mental health situation was so bad that it had been demonstrated both to and by the doctors that interacting with normal society, going to school, these things were very disruptive for me in my recovery, and I had significant challenges doing those things, even, just as a result of medication side effects. Forget the mental health issues I was having. But on the same token, I liked being a NEET, and I liked not having to work, not having to go to school, things like this. And I had a dream as to what I would do with my disability after getting approved for it. What I wanted to do was take the lump sum and buy a property. I wanted to sell the things that I had and combine that with the lump sum that you get after the period of time that you spend disabled, and then buy a property, like a very small one in Maine. And I wanted to basically fill the property with little train sets that move around the home, and I wanted to create these like cat escalators, those like tunnels that the cats run through, that sometimes go up to the ceiling and things like this, for a bunch of different cats, and start rebuilding my video game collection, and essentially live in my own little fantasy world in the cold north of this country. I had this dream for a while. I wanted to live out, an isolated, neat life, only really talking to the like one or two people that I had on IRC at the time. I remember this story pretty well because I had explained it to my friend Wes at the time over IRC. And I remember he thought it was this brilliant kind of nostalgic dream of, this Peter Pan syndrome fueled dream. And I talked to him a lot back then when I was thinking about this kind of stuff, he was one of the only people I really talked to extensively, and a lot of the things we did talk about had to do with these like neat activities, you know, staying inside all day, watching anime, learning about things on the internet, stuff like that. And eventually, my dreams as to like regarding what I would do with my own money changed a little bit. I started to have more of a constructive dream as my mental health improved. Not to say that there's anything wrong with living that way. I would still live that way to this day if I could, bring my textbooks and continue to do language learning at the same time. But I started to have more of a constructive idea of what I should do with the lump sum when I got it. What I was going to do was take my GED, and then I was going to get tutoring. I was going to get tutoring for the college entrance exams and the SAT and all that stuff, because I don't really remember this. What I read at the time was that you can take the SAT after having taken the GED, and then that can be used as like a qualification to get into college. I don't know if that's true. I haven't researched it since. That's my vague recollection of how I thought it worked at the time. But needless to say, I wanted to pay a tutor to help me in these regards, because not only had I dropped out of high school, I had not really been prepared to be in high school in the first place, because I wasn't taught all that well on like the STEM subjects when I was homeschooled, and I did a lot of cheating and workarounds in order to have to do as little work as possible. The subjects that I actually liked, I excelled in, and I did more than what was required of me. English, history. I loved English grammar for some reason that is still unbeknownst to me. And I still love English grammar. I can explain quite a few concepts to anybody who asks me. If people have a question about how English works, usually they go to me and I just explain it to them. It's great. I love having people who want to do that. But I did not really like math and science, which is sad, because nowadays I really like science of all sorts. I have a lot of books on like neuroscience and chemistry and biology as well. I find them very intriguing subjects. Health science is very interesting. But at the time, I did not have that kind of interest, unfortunately. And I just would neglect to do what I was supposed to. And as a result of that, when I was actually put in the public school system, I was really behind. I started to get it back and to relearn a lot of stuff, or to learn a lot of stuff for the first time very quickly after getting into school. But what would happen was summer would come, and then I would forget everything I learned. I would forget how to do the formulas for the problems. I would forget basically everything because I wasn't using it. And that was because I didn't have multiple years of using all that stuff behind me. Like what most people there needed was just a brief refresh to remember how to do it. And then, it was there in the long-term memory, it stayed. But because I had learned it all just for the first time, there was no way I was going to remember everything unless I continued to use it over the summer, which I didn't. And as a result of that, I came back into school not knowing what we were doing, not having the building blocks, the foundations of the work we were doing. And I sucked, I failed a lot of stuff. And after spending hours in school just sitting around not understanding what was being talked about, or struggling to do it, or overwhelming myself, I just left. I did not continue going to school. And this happened pretty early. Like, I was only in public school for like, 2 and less than a half. No. I was Yeah, no, 2.5 years pretty much. Because there was like the couple months I went to ninth grade. There was the 1 year in sixth grade, 1 year in seventh grade, and I did not have a full year in fifth grade. I don't even think it was like half a year. It was like I don't know, like 4 months or something. But so like basically 2.5 years of public schooling. Not huge, not great, but that was my experience. And I wanted to improve my level in those subjects and really come to understand them, so that I could go to college and get my bachelor's and my master's in education, so that I could teach what I'm really passionate about, which is English. So that I could teach how the English language functions, so that I could teach about English literature, which I have a very large passion for, and also so that I can harness more of the fundamentals of writing to improve my own writing. It's another big hobby of mine. But I was not the one who was granted the lump sum. You know, the lump sum went to my dad, and my dad was the payee on my disability, which is basically a system wherein, you know, another person receives the money for you because you're deemed either too young or too mentally incapacitated, maybe like irresponsible, to actually have your own money. And this was very sad for me, because that money did not get spent on the tutor that I wanted, and the, you know, the help that I wanted to get to become better at schooling and to go back to school right away. It was spent on you know, random tools and parts for the car and stuff like that. So it didn't end up getting used. But the thing is, a lot of those tools he didn't even use to build anything or to fix anything. A lot of them he just started using to tear apart the house, like to rip the baseboards off, to rip the cabinets out, to rip out pieces of the wall, to start undoing the wiring, to start tearing up the floor. And you know, all of this was being done because he thought that he could fix the place and redo it, but he wasn't actually fixing or redoing anything, because he was more invested in starting to tear up one part and then going to tear up another part. You know, like he wouldn't even finish ripping up the thing that he started ripping up before he moved to the other one, where he was like, oh, something's off with that, I need to fix that. And he wouldn't even finish destroying the part that he, quote unquote, needed to destroy in order to fix it or to remodel it or whatever, before he went on to start destroying something else. So the house just became this disheveled mess of sort of started projects that never actually finished. Meanwhile, this guy literally does not have the knowledge to do any of the stuff that he is claiming that he can do. I mean, he demonstrates a complete lack of understanding of the subjects, and still continues on because nobody could tell him otherwise. And you know, the house gets worse and worse. You know, mice start infesting it, roaches, ants, things like this, lots of spiders. And all the while, there was a gas leak that we didn't even know about until people started getting carbon monoxide poisoning. And I was just really demotivated and sad during a lot of that period, because I had this entire like idea of where my life was going to go. I had this whole conception of how I would advance my level in the school subjects and get my degree, to go on to get a job and to really change my life. And all the while, the environment that I was in was deteriorating and increasingly toxic, and the resources that I thought I would have to improve my life that the government provided for my care were being used on these frivolous things that did not contribute to the well-being of anybody that lived there, and were in fact in direct conflict with their best interest, with our best interest. So it was a tough time. But since moving out and getting this place, I've had a lot more time to improve as an artist, improve in my education, and also improve at my hobbies, the main one being language learning, but other things as well. So I see a bright future, particularly in the realm of education. I'm just a slightly late bloomer. I wanted to be doing all that, straight out the gate right after turning 18. That's not how it went, but I am improving in these areas little by little, poco a poco, and I'm going to continue to do so until ultimately I reach my goal and I live the life that I always wanted to live, one where I'm a teacher traveling the world and getting various experiences in various countries, sharing my passions with students. It's a dream that I now feel closer to than I ever had at any point in my life. I had these delays due to the adverse conditions I was living in, with all the neuroticism and mental illness that was coming in and out of that place. But that was, the last time I really had to interface with that was more than 2 years ago. So it feels more like a memory than anything now. And I'm in a very good position at this point to actually achieve the kind of things that I set out to do back then. Of course, I don't have the income for a tutor to, improve my algebra and stuff like that, but I also have the internet, and what I've learned about myself is I'm actually very good at self-study and being self-motivated, So it's not difficult to just watch videos about the subject and then practice on my own. There's so many resources out there to do that at this point that, it's kind of almost like a waste of money unless you really need a tutor, you really need someone physically there to motivate you, which I used to think that I needed that. Maybe back then I did. Nowadays, it's a very different situation. I didn't know that I had this studiousness inside of me. Is studiousness a word? I'm trying to describe the quality of being studious. I didn't know I was this studious. But I what was I gonna say? I believe the term in Spanish, if I were trying to say that that somebody, a male person, is very studious or book smart, you would say él es muy aplicado, applied, which I find interesting because it's kind of saying he's applying himself a lot, but in this context you're just saying he is very applied, and the first time I learned that, I related that to, apply yourself. Okay, so he's doing that a lot. I think it was one of the early cards I got on the Spanish Pimsleur deck, before I completed all of the, 3,000 or 4,000 cards in that deck. Good deck, very good deck if you're starting out. Highly recommend. But yeah, I would almost find it easier to describe what I've learned that I am in that language at this point. But I digress. Yeah, I didn't know that I'm capable of. Well, I didn't know I was capable of a lot of things back then, but I knew what I wanted to do, and I wanted to get there. But it took getting out of that situation and having more time to myself away from all the toxicity to really grow in a serious way. And I'm in a much better place now, and I look forward to the various developments uh, that will come in the future. That's another thing too, is I don't feel afraid of the future or overwhelmed by the present. I don't feel knocked down or hopeless. I I feel ready to seize the day with every day that comes. And that's a nice feeling. It's not one that I had back then living with them and dealing with all the nonsense and the craziness, not being able to have any control over my own money, or at least I felt my own destiny. Um, I need to feel like I'm making positive choices in my life. I need to feel like I'm advancing towards something better for myself. If I just feel idle, like I'm gonna go crazy. I go crazy without learning new things, without feeling like I'm advancing. And it instilled for a little while a big feeling of hopelessness in me when I realized I wouldn't be able to utilize my funds for that purpose, for the purpose of advancing my intellect and career. Um, you know, my dad had other plans for how the money would be used. And the whole situation was strange because if he had any complaints about how the house was, I know 100% because my aunt owned the house, she would have just paid for the repairs. Like, especially back then, before she had to pay thousands of dollars to fix the problems that he created attempting to play plumber and things like this. You know, it was a lot more expensive for her to just fix the stuff that he broke in the process of doing all this than it would have been for her to make the repairs he was trying to do, back at the time. Um, and it makes it all even more ironic in retrospect because that money totally could have been used for me to have a tutor and get some school books and stuff, but oh well, right? Sometimes the quote unquote adults in our lives have other plans for us, and other times the adults are just big children who are even more mature than their own, even more immature than their own offspring. It's kind of strange to me how in the year of our Lord 2025, I wish I could say the year of our Lord 2024 because it has a better ring to it. You still have people that don't quite understand that it's possible for one to have an opinion on their opinion and that that's an acceptable thing. It's strange, right? Like, if I think that someone's opinion is not based on good evidence or solid foundations, if I think that the internal logic that led them to that conclusion is inconsistent, and I happen to point that out, and they feel insulted by that, you know, I often see the same kind of thing that's said in response to what I say. This kind of thought terminating cliche where they default to saying, well, it's just my opinion and I have a right to think that. It's like, I'm not criticizing your opinion itself. I'm not saying that you can't have one. What I'm criticizing is the internal logic that led you to that opinion. I'm attempting to improve the epistemology that you're working with. Um, but I think a lot of people are not necessarily interested in these kinds of exercises in truth or rhetoric, in attempting to create like logically consistent arguments for the things that we say. I think a lot of people are more interested in just kind of saying how they feel, which is fine. Like, I don't take this debate approach to most conversations, right? I've talked to a lot of people who say some really stupid shit, and I just sort of, you know, let it fall off. I don't think much of it. I go, huh, oh, that's interesting. That's a that's a bit different, and then I don't think about it afterwards. Um, but there are certain things that people, particularly like people who present themselves as kind of intellectual or thoughtful, will say that are really stupid, and I will want to criticize them because like you're putting all of this effort into presenting yourself as this like thoughtful, like thinking guy online or whatever. Um, and so if you're really that, like if you want to be seen as that, then why don't I challenge you on something that I think you could do a little bit better? And if you don't think that you could do better on it and that you're in the right, substantiate that claim. Respond directly to the accuracy of my claims instead of just deferring to this truism, this thought terminating cliche that everyone has their own opinion and that's that. Because that does not generate conversation. That terminates conversation, that ends it. Um, but I think a lot of people are too sensitive to really engage in that kind of thoughtful exercise, no matter how friendly it may be, you know. But I find in a lot of cases my bluntness in particular tends to like stave people off from wanting to have those conversations because if they present themselves like, oh, I'm into philosophy, I'm into thinking about stuff, like, here, let me send you paragraphs about whatever, yeah, I'm gonna respond bluntly to your shit. If you say something that's fucking retarded, I'm gonna tell you that that thing is retarded. I'm not gonna tell you that you are. That's not nice, but yeah, the thing that you said, yeah, that's fucking dumb. And I can tell you exactly why. So I'm currently trying to get to sleep, but I thought, why not record a video as I struggle to get to bed? You know, I used to be a big fan of Trixie the Golden Witch, formerly known as Digibro's content. Um, but not just her stuff. I was a big fan of like the content that her friends made, all on a podcast called the Procrastinators Podcast. And when me and No Thank You and Dotesmite and Plunder really all together started doing this Denpa thing, along with some other more minor creators that uh, don't matter all that much now in retrospect, but I digress. We got some other people who came on a little bit later too. Jalay Lane Caucus, Karasu, who deleted all of his videos, unfortunately. Horror Love released her private videos to us. Like all the Denpa people, we were all doing our thing, and sort of the through line between all of us was that in one way or another we were big fans of what the procrastinators were doing. But me and No, we were like OG fans. We were watching for a really long time. I guess Plunder was an OG fan too, come to think of it. She was watching Trixie's content before I was even. Like, she was there during the pony days. But needless to say, we were all, in one way or another, inspired by that plethora of content. And for a couple years, both me and No made these videos talking about our nostalgia for what Trixie's content used to be like. Oh yeah, did I just completely forget about Artificial Night Sky? I mean, of course I forgot about Artificial Night Sky. It's not that easy. It's not that easy to remember his videos. God bless his heart. But anyway, I I did all this content where I was talking about how I like missed the time in my life when I was watching her videos all the time. But as more and more time went on, the less and less nostalgic I was for that period of my life. Because it was kind of just miserable and terrible, right? Like, she was making videos about how she was miserable and terrible, um, and they were really resonant and good, but I was also miserable, as indicated by the fact that I was spending 10, 12 hours a day just watching YouTube videos that were not, educational, not really engaging my thought process outside of like some inspiration or some basic food for thought. It was really just, docile entertainment, mindless consumption, not as mindless as fucking scrolling on TikTok or some bullshit like that, but it still like wasn't good for me to be doing that all the time. And I think the reason I was doing that was because I felt as though I didn't have anything better to do. I didn't really know how to do other things. Like, I was trying to improve as a writer and a YouTuber. I practiced at those things. But beyond that, I did not do things. I was very sedentary. And not in like the, oh, I'm gonna be sedentary and then, write a thesis or do a bunch of math all day. I was sedentary. Like, I did not, my brain was not engaged, and I was not physically engaged. And it wasn't good. And I look at the sheer amount of things that I do nowadays and how active my mind feels and how happy it feels to wake up and to do things, and I just cannot feel nostalgic about that time in my life anymore. I haven't felt nostalgic about it in quite a while. A lot of those videos, even now when I go back to them, don't even feel the same way. Some of them do, but it's not really possible to transport yourself back to where you were when you were 14 years old. And like, at this point, why would I want to? I feel better now than I ever have at any point in my life. I have so many of the things I always wanted. I have a much more balanced perspective than I used to. Much more balanced emotions. I'm more emotionally stable. I am better at doing literally everything now than I was at that time. So why would I feel nostalgic about it? Why would I feel nostalgic about, a time when I was lazy and sedentary and just watching YouTube videos all day, not doing anything productive or worthwhile? I don't identify with that time in my life anymore. For me, fundamentally, what being in need is about utilizing one's time in a way that is most conducive to like happiness maximization. Like, how can I be the happiest and most fulfilled version of myself? Obviously, working for somebody else, doing things that you don't want to do, is not conducive to that. So with all this free time that I have as an unemployed person, how can I best utilize that to live a better life, to be a happier person, to be a healthier person? Obviously, laying around and listening to YouTube videos all day is not the path to that kind of happiness or fulfillment. So I cannot feel nostalgic for that time. I haven't in a while, but it's like I'm at a point now where I literally cannot imagine myself feeling nostalgic for that time again either. I mean, not only because it was so long ago, like when I was watching her videos all the time, I was literally 14. Like that was 7. Wait, no, that was more than, I was about to say that was 7 years ago. I thought I was younger than I am for a moment. That was literally 9 years ago. Like, it's not gonna work out like that. So, yeah, I don't know. I'm really sleepy. I'm really tired. But I wanted to talk about that strange character, that theme that is often brought up in my videos, that's been brought up so many times now. Um, yeah, it wouldn't be a Denpa vlog without the shadow of the artist formerly known as Digibro. Why did I change my mind about selling everything in my room? The simple reason is I found myself making a lot of language gains very quickly without ever having to leave my house. Through mass immersion and through a very dedicated approach to studying, I have been able to advance my level quite quickly. And I did it all without ever having to go to a school. Is it true that by attending an immersion school and staying with a host family, I could potentially advance my level even quicker? I think it's quite possible. But right now I'm simulating the experience entirely through self-study. And so the idea that by selling all of my possessions, stuff that I'm quite attached to, merely to go do that is worthwhile is questionable. It's a questionable proposition. And the other component of this is like, not only do I want to keep my collection because I'm attached to this stuff, I use this stuff, I also want to expand my collection. There's a lot of games out there, especially games from Japan, that I still want to play, that I still want to try. And the idea that I get rid of all my stuff just to buy it all back again is kind of a strange one. You know, like, I already have all this stuff, why get rid of it just to get a job and then attempt to buy it all back at a later date? Like, that's kind of a strange plan that I developed. So I think it's much more logical. It makes much more sense just to continue doing what I've been doing. And then eventually, after getting a job and saving up money, I could, at a later date, actually get, if I want still, you know, the immersion school experience, or, you know, expand my collection of textbooks or learning resources, and as well as my video game collection. You know, the one downside of that is, like, if I get a job with the goal of saving money for school, it will take longer. Like, me working is going to take up so much time that I could be spending studying at home. And so it'll take longer if I do things that way. And I think when I was more married to the idea of going to a school and having that experience, I wanted to get there as fast as possible. So I thought that by selling everything that I had, it would make the experience go a lot smoother. I'd have to spend as little time as possible working until I had enough money. And then I could spend more time at home immersing and studying and things like that. But again, as someone who really highly values my time and my things, I think I've found a way now to get to the level that I want to, and it was hiding under my nose the whole time. Literally the whole time. I was doing the thing that I needed to do to get to the level that I want to get to. And I know this because I see my level going up quite rapidly right now. So that's why I decided not to sell everything.